At the end of the last video, 30-foot arrived at Ghost Ranch and went looking for Roadrunner and Waterboy. It's weird calling him 30-foot. He's my husband and I just call him Dave. I'm narrating this video because at the end of this section, Dave came home for my birthday and our anniversary. Don't worry, I'll send him back to the trail after all the festivities. By some definitions, he went home 15 times while hiking the PCT in 2023. Of course, it was easier for him to come home while hiking in the West Coast states. Anyway, Dave found Roadrunner and Waterboy in the Ghost Ranch campground. They hung out together until the two of them left the next morning after breakfast. Dave stayed an extra day and actually paid for a room for the second night. At the end of their hiking day, Dave got a text from Roadrunner saying that they had only made it 17 miles. This was partly because the trail dead-ended into a cliff somewhere in a box canyon just north of Ghost Ranch. Dave's feet were doing much better, so after his fifth town meal, he was off and heading up the canyon north of Ghost Ranch. The original Ghost Ranch guest accommodations were something to see, especially comparing them to the modern casitas. Where Far Out said he needed to leave the box canyon trail, Dave ducked down to avoid hitting this cactus. It was weird that he didn't feel his trekking pole hit it. It seems no matter how low he ducks, the pole always hits what he's trying to avoid. Oh no! He discovered he left his pole back at the ranch. He dropped his pack and raced back. After a 2-mile trail run, he found his pole at the campground. Then another 2 miles back, he was already exhausted and the day had only just begun. He followed the trail a little further and he reached the same cliff that gave Roadrunner and Waterboy trouble. Far Out was directing everyone into a dead-end cliff. Jeez. Speaking of Waterboy, Dave spotted a foam pad on the trail. Through a text exchange with Roadrunner, Dave confirmed that it was Waterboy's. Dave committed to carrying it to Highway 17, just on the other side of the Colorado border. Frustrated by poorly maintained trails and branches smacking him in the face, Dave started doing a little impromptu trail maintenance.
Trail maintenance. Trail maintenance. Trail maintenance. Trail maintenance. Trail maintenance.
Finally out of the canyon, he found himself on a dirt road where a couple of kids driving a pickup offered him a ride. Although he turned them down, the rest of the road walk he fantasized that they came back, and this time he said yes. You know, to make up for that extra 4-mile run. He kept walking after his shadow grew long, but he could only manage a 17-mile day. It was a cold night, but he didn't put his phone and battery in his quilt with him. In the morning, his phone, which was shut off, was only at 87%, not 100%, and the battery was down to 64%. In the cold, the batteries lose efficiency. Note, it is important to charge the phone while it is still shut down. The single hardest thing Dave does all day is getting out of his warm quilt. Sure, climbing a steep long hill is tough, but no single step is as hard as getting out of his bag and into sub-freezing temperatures. No wonder, even though he woke up at 6, he didn't get going until 8:15. By then the sun was on his tent and the frost had melted on one side that was facing the sun. Dave looked up these plants that resemble the Sierra lily. Apparently they are called corn lilies in this part of the country. Dave spotted a coyote, but it was too sneaky to be captured on camera. Walking on really boggy ground is very disconcerting. It's like stepping on a trampoline. He didn't record it because he was in a hurry. He was afraid he'd break through, and that would be scary. Dave thought a lot about the difference between the PCT and the CDT this day. He decided his relationship with the PCT was a partnership. Sure, it was hard, but the PCT was going to make it worth his while. He figured his relationship with the CDT was adversarial. The CDT sometimes messes with him just for fun. I guess he was feeling philosophical this day. He thought back to the dinner at Silver City where he ate with Dipper, Bootstrap, and Almighty. At the dinner, Dipper asked the table, what is the best part of a hike, towns or the trail? Without putting a lot of thought into it, Dave said that the towns are the punctuation. After thinking about his answer for another 500 miles, he agreed with his previous self. Towns are fun, but without the trail, the town stops are meaningless. A quick meal like the one he was hoping for at Platoro would be a comma. An underwhelming stop maybe like the Doc Campbell's, might just be a period. Belden on the PCT was definitely a question mark. Most stops are an exclamation point, though. At dinner, someone said David should use that answer in one of his videos. I guess he is. He appreciated these logs, but someone got the mileage wrong. The only people he saw all day was at Cahilan Lakes. A mother and her 2 daughters were fishing. After catching enough for their lunch, they came over to Dave and offered him some trail magic. It was a hot day, but he was high enough to have access to snow, so he did the snowball trick to cool off. Your extremities act like a radiator on hot days. Passing a snowball from hand to hand really improves the cooling action. He camped at Rio Valecitos, which allowed him to clean up his feet before bed. In the morning, after the river crossing, he saw some deer. Now nearly out of the state, he passed a classic New Mexican tank. This one actually had water. At a lake campground, he saw the only people for the day. Dwayne and Wanda invited him over to chat and gave him a beer. In the afternoon, Dave was not looking forward to trying to sleep that night, feeling all sticky and gross from the 3 days of hiking. That's when he came upon an idea. How about bathing with snow? He says there's nothing as invigorating as rubbing snow all over your nether regions. I'll have to take his word for that.
Right turn, Clyde.
At the end of the day, Dave found himself climbing a gently sloped grazing landscape that brought him above 11,000 feet. It looked a lot like the moors of England. The vast open area, completely devoid of animal life, made it spooky and reminded him of the movie The American Werewolf in London.
Stay on the road. Keep clear to the moors. Beware the moon and stick to the road. Oops.
In this area, these gopher eskers were everywhere. He got up early the next morning and had breakfast at a creek before starting the big climb for the day. Near the top, he came to a lake with a campground. So based on the previous 2 days' experiences, he figured that this was where he'd see the only people for the day. The campground was empty, so he thought he might have to go the whole day alone. That being said, the lake was full of wild action. These long-nosed days were spawning. On top of a ridge overlooking the lakes, Dave ran into nomadic Norsemen. The Norseman had just finished chatting with his wife because the ridge had signal. The 2 hikers spoke briefly. Dave found out that NN was section hiking the CDT to fill in what he had missed in 2023. Dave wanted to call me since it was probably his only opportunity of the day. He figured that nomadic Norseman and he would probably see each other again. If it weren't for this video, Dave might have thought he had hallucinated this encounter. They never ran into each other again. Dave might have passed nomadic Norseman while he hiked through the afternoon's driving rain and pounding wind. NN could have been hunkered down during the worst of it, and that's how Dave missed him. After dropping elevation a bit, he had to climb again to the highest point in New Mexico, and only 4 miles from the border to Colorado. He stopped a half-mile short of the top. The blowdowns were getting bad and there was a lot of snow. He figured after a nightly freeze, the snow would be easier to walk on in the morning. Well, it didn't freeze overnight, so the snow stayed slushy. In the morning, he was in no mood to record video. It took him half an hour just to go half a mile. Sometimes following hoof prints was better than boot prints. The animals know the trail better than the people. It took 3.5 hours to go 5 miles to the border, and the only reason it was so fast was because Dave found a forest road that helped a little. At the border monument, there was trail magic and a logbook. The log entry said, "Enjoy a beer. It only gets harder from here." Way to bring a guy down. At least Dave was in Colorado now. The next 3 miles to Highway 17 were tough. It was incredibly windy, but at least it was downhill, so it only took an hour. The trail crossed the highway at Cumbers Pass, which is also the site of the highest narrow-gauge railroad in North America. Feeling a little down, Dave went looking for a geocache at the railway site. To get a win. On the other side of the highway, Dave found a logbook signed by hikers following the red line. Margarita and Cisco were 2 days ahead of him, but Dave wasn't going to take the red line. He was going to take the Great Divide alternative east, which followed Highway 17 15 miles east to Forest Road 250. Since Highway 17 had very few cars, he was expecting a difficult hitch. but he got a ride immediately. Thank you, Melissa. Next thing he knew, he was hiking up Forest Road 250 through Horka. The only thing of interest in Horka was Red Bear House, a bar and grill that opened in mid-May. I guess May 14th isn't mid enough, so no Red Bear for Dave. As he started up the Forest Road, it was only 1 p.m. He had a good 7 hours before sunset and a well-graded road with only a slight incline. He committed to doing big miles. He'd follow the Conejos River through the picturesque valley the rest of the day. It looked like a great place to spend summers during your golden years. He did stop at Spectacle Lake, where he soaked his feet a bit. He stopped at the Rocky Mountain Lodge briefly, but found it closed. It was probably a fun place during the tourist season. Right after this sign, a flatbed tow truck drove like hell past Dave towards Highway 17. Normally, when Dave is all used up, he just pulls over and puts his tent up next to the trail, but there was no place to do that. Instead, at sunset, Dave came to Lake Fork Campground. He couldn't go any further, so he stayed there even though it was officially closed. His feet felt like well-tenderized slabs of meat. They seemed to have lost all structural integrity. He had hiked 17 miles of forest road, 8 miles of trail before Highway 17, and had hitched 15 miles. That checked off 40 miles in one day. On the morning, Dave used the campground's water pump, but discovered that the water was full of bleach. Campground staff were probably sanitizing the system before the upcoming season. As a result, Dave had to toss the water he'd collected. He had just 5 miles to Platoro. Based on far-out comments, he had reason to believe that he could get breakfast there. During the whole walk to Platoro, Dave had the feeling that he was missing something. He had started this section with 8 days of food. He was on his 6th day and had very little water. The pack just felt too light. By 11, the weight had settled in, and the pack definitely didn't feel too light anymore. Spotting Platoro in the distance felt like seeing the next village while hiking in Nepal. In town, Dave was told by a local that the only one of the 3 places that could serve breakfast might be open. So he headed over to the Skyline Lodge, where he met the old proprietor and the parent of the present owners. Dave had a lovely conversation with her, but breakfast wasn't a possibility. He had a sad breakfast of ramen on the side of the road before his first climb of the day. He needed to go over a 10,500-foot pass and then drop down into the Alamosa River and the historic mining town of Stunner. It was fun reading about the old settlement. The sign talked about the old road that paralleled the river. The road was so narrow that if 2 wagons met face to face, one wagon would have to be disassembled and rebuilt on the other side of the meeting. Dave was expecting to be in civilization the next day, so when he came to the river, he climbed down under the bridge to use the raging water as a private bathhouse. After the river, it was all uphill on Forest Road 380, up to 11,700 feet elevation. At 3 p.m., he came to a beautiful but private lake where he had a late lunch and stared at the clouds looking for shapes. Do you see the dragon? About 2 miles from the top, he started running into snow that partially blocked and then later fully blocked the road. This group tried to cross a stretch of the snow and got stuck. They made the best of it. They set up their folding chairs and cracked out the beer while they waited for a tow truck. Getting through the snow was frustrating, but on the other side, he got signal for the first time in 2 days. He called me while sitting next to this fenced-off utility. He met a woman and her dog who drove up from the other side of the mountain. She had the good sense to stop and hike when she came to the first patch of snow. Where are the cows? David hadn't seen a cow since before Cuba, but he'd seen plenty of cattle guards and cow pies. At sunset, David spotted a small black bear cresting a hill running away from him, but the phone camera refused to focus until it was gone. He camped right off the road. Sometimes the trail is about looking at the beautiful scenery. Sometimes it's about spotting wild animals. Sometimes it's just about getting 10 by 10. By 8 a.m. it was clear Dave was going to get his first 10 by 10 of his CDT trek, so he could relax and try to spot the coyote that ran into the stand of aspens. He could also afford to marvel at these massive rocks that clearly rolled down from the mountain. What a calamity they must have caused. By 11 a.m., Dave had hiked 14 miles to Highway 160. The hitch to Pagosa Springs, the first step on his getting home, would not be easy. He walked towards Pagosa, stopping at every pullout and put out his thumb. Although the road was busy, no one was interested in helping him out. perhaps people weren't stopping because they thought that the pullouts were too small. After 2 miles, he came to a place for putting on and taking off snow chains. There he stopped to make his stand. The pullout was big enough to land a plane. Despite that, it took another 2 hours to get a ride. Thank goodness for Gustavo. Not only did he drive Dave to Pagosa Springs, but after Gustavo took care of a few things in town, he drove Dave all the way to Durango. Dave stayed the night at the Durango Lodge and ate at the historic Stratter Hotel. He did his laundry in the lodge's sink so that he could be presentable for the long train ride home. Snake count, sorry to disappoint you again. Psych! 2. He finally saw another snake on day 1 of this section. It was just a little whip snake, but it counts. Trail stop checklist. New Mexico, complete. Platoro, check. Pagosa Springs, check.
New Mexico, New Mexico, New Mexico, New Mexico, New Mexico. Colorado, 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 Colorado.